Cool. Welcome everyone to today, December 3rd, 2020. Where, yeah, no one on Epic, no one on APAC, so that is true so far. Today we are talking about what to do with our shared common library. The loose name for this is splitting common because that's the primary issue we will be discussing, but there are a few other alternatives, and because it's a brainstorming, maybe other things will come up. So issue is in the agenda, and unless anyone has anything to start with, we can just start running down the agenda. Cool. So Fabian, do you want to start, or should I paint some background? Or is everyone familiar with what we're talking about so far?
If you feel like this is
who's
needed.
not familiar? Yeah. Who's not familiar with that and needs background?
It might take too much time. I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
I'll just give like a 2-minute one because someone might watch this recording later. So we have a library called Common that we use among all of the SAST analyzers, the dependency scanning analyzers, currently Clara for container scanning, and fuzzing also uses this. So we currently have quite a few different groups using a common library that is not really a library so much as a collection of separate Go modules that are used together. There's no real contract that all of these have to be used, and different analyzers use different groupings of them, but they're currently stored in a single repository. So we're considering how else we can structure this to improve our velocity and untie ourselves together. Okay. Fabian, would you like to take your point?
Yeah, one repo and one changelog, one set of versions. And to me, that's the main pain point. So there are many packages in this repo. For instance, we've got one we use to generate reports, security reports, and another one for handling CLI analyzers, sorry. These are very different, and when, let's say, as a user of this common library, if I want to get the latest version of let's say, common issue, I might have to update to the latest version of command because it's been updated, and I don't want that. So that's one aspect, versioning, just one set of versions, and also it makes very difficult to introduce breaking changes. Like we've got ideas on changing the issue package, renaming the issue struct to anonymity, which is not a big deal, but it's a major breaking change. We've kept it that way just because we can't. It would be disruptive for all consumers of this library. Yeah, so to me, that's the main pain point. That's not the only one. There's also maintenance, have it clear code owners, but I would start there. What do you think, Olivier? You're writing something.
So assuming Olivier's responses.
Oh, Lucas, sorry, you're first. Sorry.
Is to mine. We don't technically have to do, excuse me, what we're doing. We could properly use tags, which we don't currently. That would basically involve making a Git tag that matches the path of the submodule in that repository. But there's still a lot of reasons why it would be more flexible to treat them separately. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
Yeah, that's something we've explored in the issue, and it looks like no one is used to that. It's very uncommon. It works. It's been tested in the past in the, I don't know in which project, but it works. But it's uncommon. But are there other limitations you want to share with us? I don't remember.
So one reason that we didn't immediately start doing that when we experimented with it was because while we would need to consider versioning separately, have separate change logs for each submodule. There's a bit, and that gets just a bit complex. I think the primary reason though was just it doesn't seem very common, and we're not super familiar with that. But I know that Zach, you as well, you raised some concerns about this in the issue, which try and find your comments. So not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
I mean, I'm currently writing up kind of something I'm more concerned with rather than like the change log. So I'm gonna withhold right now.
I've got one, by the way. It doesn't work with GitLab releases. The releases page in the GitLab projects. That would be so confusing because there's only one release, the Git tag. So it's not supported by GitLab itself.
On my side, I haven't heard that we complain that dealing with multiple repositories is painful. We have to create too many merge requests at the same time. And I'm wondering how much of the split will increase that, that pain, or if we consider that all those different modules will be dependent enough to avoid that. And I think it would be then a good situation to split into separate repositories. Another concept obviously is that we are kind of putting ourselves in the situation of a monorepo that I know was for a long time a painful situation to handle with GitLab, even if it's getting better. As mentioned by Fabian, the GitLab release is one more feature that doesn't work well with monorepo approach. So
yeah, I think that there are like a lot of like assumptions that we have with the way that projects work at GitLab or like on the product too. So if we're talking about ownership, we have the rule set module that we just added, which is only used by SAST currently. It could be used for other analyzers, but assuming that it stays with SAST, then having a separate project does things like gives the SAST team a dedicated security dashboard for any vulnerabilities that come up in modules we own. We can do similar things with ownership with code owners, but I think that the GitLab object model just tends to work better with separate repos and projects.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. If we had a SaaS library, a SaaS common library, this rule set package would start there, would start its life there, and then possibly can extract it if it's relevant, if we identify that it's needed by other teams, but it would start in the SaaS common library, removing the need for reviews by everyone. I mean, all backend teams, which is a pain, which slows you down, by the way. That's another concern, another pain point, actually. Yeah, Olivier, I wanted to comment on what you said about the risks of having too many repos and possibly the need to coordinate merge requests when it's related. Hopefully, we don't have to create like what six repos right from the beginning. We can extract what's more relevant. I would start with issue, which is a bad name for what it is. It's the package we use to create reports. I would start there, a bit like an experiment because we can learn from that, but also because we are sure that it's not connected to the others. We are sure we need specific versions in order to introduce breaking changes in this particular package. And then we might identify other repos we would extract later. We don't have to do it all at once, which is great news. We can iterate.
It might be possible to quickly plot those dependencies. I mean, these dependencies are declared in each package with the import statements. So there might be a quick way to quickly picture out which packages depend on each other to highlight what is really independent and can easily be extracted. That could help us driving those kind of decisions. But yeah, cool, like it.
And also about not rushing. Yeah, one note on this path filter library, not library, package. That's something we should remove in the future. It's not, we should use double star instead, because it's what we use for the rules exists syntax. So there are packages we should remove in the future, but there's no need to extract them from this existing common repo. They can, and they're live there, and no need, yeah, nothing to do there.
Yeah, and I think that a good example of that is, so you mentioned path filter and search and walk. So it sounds like
search and walk, yeah, because we won't need that in independent scanning in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I listed out all the modules, I think all of them, on 0.5, just to have an overview in front of us. And I would kind of thought maybe it'd be worth color coding this, but maybe I'll restructure this in terms of priority or shared ones, which is, I was reviewing the change log to see where most of the changes happen. So if we want to reduce the surface area of where there are conflicts and where multiple teams are working at once, issue is definitely the #1 place where we touch it most often.
With one exception though, it doesn't tell. It doesn't say anything about the issue that are blocked, because we don't want to introduce breaking changes. That's the case for the issue package, sorry, not library package. There are things we want to do, but we can't do them just because it's shared, and we can't introduce major versions. But yes, otherwise, yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, and I would say the other one too that really is worth talking about the most is probably the command module, which is also, I think the command module is the most obvious module for this other point that we talked about, which is, I guess, 0.4, namely the idea of like using more of a framework than common, and adding some kind of intermediate framework for like a SAS framework.
Yeah,
of course.
This one could be specific to SAS and then scanning until we no longer need that in the context of event scanning. Because, and by the way, what recently we introduced rule set, it's needed by SAS, as you said before. It's not needed by event scanning, but we had to review the code nevertheless, because it's in the command package. So one thing, and also introduced a small regression independent scanning. By the way, it's not a big deal, but all that could have been avoided if it had been a different, I mean, SAS only, SAS specific.
Is this comment on B, I don't know who added this, but this is referring to A? Sorry, I reordered things, so I hope I didn't change this.
Merging. This might be the report, yeah, when we were merging multiple output within the same job when using Docker in Docker. Okay. We have this capability in the report package, issue package.
Okay. Oh yeah, because we have a report package too. Okay. All right, so this is used by, is this used by Clara as well? So SAST.
I think so.
I think so.
And fuzzing, I don't know if fuzzing uses this. I assume. I think if anyone who uses common probably uses this. Command, I don't know.
So Clar uses command and issue. Say assert, CA assert, sorry, speaking French. That's it, I think. Yeah, that's it. And I know issue is used by fuzzing based on their recent contributions to this package.
I was trying to see if common was, I'm sorry, a command. But I only see issue and Logutil. Okay.
So this is highlighting a dependency between Logutil and issue, which means when we are putting changes into issue, we might have to immediately update Logutil.
I think that they're used independently. Because the only thing Logutil does really is it sets the formatting for when you're running whatever commands you're running to have standard, like it includes the name of the analyzer in the CI output.
Yeah, I agree. We can extract that one. There's no risk. It's totally independent. It's self-contained. It's an easy pick, I would say.
So yeah, and browser
comment. Sorry, go ahead.
Browser doesn't use common at all right now. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Browser doesn't use common, and DAS doesn't either. Okay. So I don't know if it's useful going through these. I just thought it'd be useful going through them very quickly to see what kind of overlap we have, but we can go back up to our other points.
I want to make sure we discuss location for these repos, these new repos. One suggestion was to use, to put them under analyzers, but I much prefer having a specific project group because it could be confusing. Something like, I don't know, analyzer/command could be understood as an analyzer itself, named command. I don't know, that would be a weird name, but still, I believe it's confusing. It could be confusing.
Yeah,
but then
I'm the
we
one
need
that
a
brought
name
that,
for
that
the
up, and
project.
I think that's. Oh, I was going to say I don't really stand by that. My comment that I simply putting all these new split repos under analyzer because of that. So just wanted to vocalize that.
Okay.
I personally am going to vocalize indifference. I honestly don't care what it's called. So if anyone has a strong opinion, I'm fine with going with that.
The location is often an issue for us when it comes to dealing with public-facing deliverables. like the container registry. You all know about that. I don't know how much this is an issue. I mean, obviously, this might change the import path when importing the package in another analyzer. So this might still have implications, and we should carefully think about it. I agree that it might be confusing into the analyzers subgroup. Particularly if we want to create some automations, I think it might be interesting to have a dedicated one.
So I have to go, but one last comment. The more important thing is to find a location, to agree on a location, and then whatever it's going to be, I don't mind. As soon as we have this location, we'll be able to create a library. I mean, a new repo, like one for issue. That's going to be great. Sorry, so I've got to go. Often.
Okay, I'll summarize that in the issue.
Okay, let me just state this because I missed it, and I'll admit to multitasking at this point. If finding a location for all of this is the most important concern, then that tells me that splitting common has been the decided path forward. Is that correct?
I think how to split it hasn't been decided because
Let me rephrase it. How it is split is a next step. Splitting it has been stipulated as something that needs to happen. That's what I'm hearing. Am I correct in that?
I think so.
So
I think it's a worthwhile. It's a worthwhile experiment to try it with at least one high touch module and see how that goes. So one split will occur, whether or not that is split the entire thing apart. We can defer that.
Yeah, I get it. We split off. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, we yes, iteratively working through this. It doesn't have to be a big bang change. I agree. It'll create a mess, but
yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
The only reason I say that is I think that I don't know if we have to make a decision strong that splitting is the way we're going forward, but I think that we can make a smaller commitment to trying a longer term experiment.
One of the benefits of splitting was to highlight what's really common and shared between all group and need multiple approval when putting changes or designing new changes on them versus isolated module that could be given to a specific group for ownership and maintain on their own. If we take out issue, we know that the issue is a shared one. So this new repository will require approval from all the groups, basically. What's left in common? Would that be more independent, or would there still be their shared PC that would still require to have all approvals in those merge requests?
I think that's a really good point. If we want to just, if the goal is to immediately decouple, then we should probably choose something that's strongly single group like rule set. But it's not going to move us forward in terms of figuring out how to split out more.
Maybe you can do both. I mean, this could highlight the two benefits, I'd say. So, but yeah.
I'd argue for anything split from the existing common library is assigned a group that owns it. And that doesn't mean those are the people that are charged with merging it and are giving maintainers rights over that particular split artifact.
That brings a lot more touchy discussion then, because if we were to extract issue and decide to give ownership of that to a unique group, that means this group is taking decision for all the others when it comes to dealing with the report schema content.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean necessarily that the other groups have to use the split version of issue. Mm-hmm. If we split issue and SAS says we own it, I'm not saying that SAS should, but if SAS says we own this split version, maybe that's more closer to forking, but it doesn't mean that everyone has to follow and use that version of issue.
Okay, and this is where I wanted to come with the other issue about where we define the boundaries of what needs to be used consistently across all the analyzer and where you can get your autonomy. So this is exactly the next step on that discussion, and I'm fine with that. And but it has implication, because it means we are acting the fact that even if we are all producing analyzer, we might add different implementation for the exact same purpose, which is building the report, the Schema report from a Go library. And to me, it's a very big discussion, because we are acknowledging that we will duplicate the work, the effort, the costs within the same company to achieve the exact same goal, for a benefit of not having multiple groups reviewing all the changes in the merge request. So it's a tough decision. And it's a strong choice too. And maybe it's highlighting that we are doing something wrong, because I like to try to compare how we work within Secure versus how the rest of the company work within the GitLab Rails application. So we have a given set of maintainers in the Rails application that can take decision about any place, any product area in the code base. And if something is done wrong, it should be cut by tests. So I'd argue that, yes, static analysis is responsible for the new report package, report module. And they are responsible for maintaining it, which means anytime we're doing a change there that will break something for any other category, it should break a test. But it should work, even if you are the only team responsible and maintaining officially that package, and maybe responsible for moving forward on its roadmap. Why it doesn't work for us? I mean, it's kind of working, let's say, for all the rest of the company on the GitLab Rails application in theory. In practice, we can see some hiccups, but why it wouldn't work here?
Yeah, I think that's a really, I don't know. And so I had point 10 on here too, which was should we consider a lack of schema enforcement to be a concern here? If we just added a job that checked if the output of scanners conform to schemas, does that cover us? Or is that enough of a seatbelt to protect us in splitting things?
I think it is when we do some small changes, just to make sure when someone is adding things to their own report, it doesn't break for the others, at least for the current form of the schema that we have. The problem is this is just covering the output aspect of the integration of the analyzers. And there is the overall other aspect, which is dealing with the input, how we integrate those analyzer in the CI pipeline, how it interacts with the configuration YAML file. And it then can impact our UX consistency. So it's hard to enforce that consistency when you don't enforce the implementation. And since we want to no longer enforce the implementation, we will lack this consistency enforcement somehow. So I would still prefer that approach, that there is just one team responsible to enforce the implementation consistency than removing it. But yeah, we need to figure out how we can do that with safety belt, like you said. And the schema is not covering everything.
Yeah. I don't really, I'm sorry, Zach.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, that enforcing the schema, I mean, that's something that should be fairly easily like unit testable within each analyzer, right? I mean, what is the artifact from convert? Does that match the schema? right? I mean, that's all we're pretty much saying that we need.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. I took that from a bigger scope perspective, but when it comes to this specific model, you're right that the schema might be enough. Sorry, I went too far.
So the other thing that I don't want to talk about, because I don't think there are enough hours this week to discuss, but we should also think about where generic security reports fits into this, which is something that I understand. From what I understand, we do not have to conform to with our current scanners for the immediate future, but I fully expect that to have a greater discussion. But that does mean producing a similar security schema format, which is basically what issue is doing somewhere else.
Is this for like other standards like Serif, or is that what you're talking about?
It's similar to Serif, but developed by Threat Insight and vulnerability research to provide a simpler generic schema, but just something that we might have to deal with.
And this is about the spec. We will still need an implementation support, which is this library. So I think it's still valuable.
If I could, before we talk about this, could we? There's a point that I wanted to bring up about the splitting of the
Sorry,
repos.
jumping around too much.
Yeah, no worries. So I put it in 1G. So for example, like the rule set package, right? That introduced an issue because we added this rule set package, which we also had to update the command package because of that. And it seems to me that like all of issue, Logutil, path filtered, CA cert, rule set, search/walk, table, these are all packages that do not kick off a these are all packages that are like purely just a library, right? So they could be I guess refactored to be like purely just a library and not necessarily like mutate anything. So you give it a bunch of vulnerabilities, it dedupes, and you are returned a bunch of vulnerabilities, right? Command is the thing that actually runs. It's more of a framework, and the problem was command. We SAS introduced rule sets, which is specific to just SAS, and the other teams don't use it yet. But if, like Fabian said, he had a comment. If SAS had their own command that we owned, and then used this other repo, which is we might call it library or whatever, that has issue, Logutil, pretty much everything besides command in it, then the other teams wouldn't have that issue. To me, this seems like the most natural breakpoint, where we are. It's kind of a separation of concerns where one is purely just a library, the other is kind of a framework that teams could use. And it's a lot of boilerplate. And I also it could be that maybe we don't even need the command package, where each analyzer defines the implementation on how to produce a report, right?
Which is basically what we do with secrets right now, right?
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not suggesting that, you know, that's the best one, but I mean, I think splitting out command and then, or I guess consolidating everything besides command into a specific or into its own repo as the library. To me, that makes the most sense rather than splitting it all up into a bunch of, you know, because it's just like who's going to be using these packages besides folks within secure. Like,
yeah, so I think that's true for and I was trying to figure out who exactly is using these different ones. So I think that's a very good point, because it is absolutely different and we should treat command differently. And that's probably the biggest one for splitting. But I think that issue is used more by like fuzzing uses issue, and clar uses issue, but neither of those use the run command. So I think that like those two, it would really help us split out the implementation if you have each group provides a command or deals with their own method of execution. But there's like, we still have a shared issue with primarily issue, I think, which we need to rename drastically. But I think that, yeah, I completely agree that command would probably be the best one to split out there.
Do we want to keep it as a shared model, as a model that every team will leverage? Because this is what I've seen emerging from some discussion, is that some team might want to execute their analyzer in a slightly different way. And maybe at some point they will need to, because the more deeper, the deeper we go into the functionality of each category, the bigger we diverge from others, because fundamentally doing a dynamic analysis is not the same as doing a static analysis. And what was working fine in the past to be very consistent in the way we start an analyzer, for example, and run by using this same run command package, for example, might no longer be true now. And maybe this is the little parts of the implementation when we could just give freedom to every analyzer, or maybe every type of analyzer. So if you find you have a very consistent way of starting your analyzer for SAS, for example, you could have this dedicated package for yourself, but that totally doesn't need it. For example, our dependency scanning is using a slightly different way to kick things off for its analyzers. So instead of trying to maintain that, this was part to me of the framework aspect of common, which is ensuring consistency in the way we integrate. But I think this is where we want to move that consistency more to the left, maybe, because we move everything to the left, but more at the way we are defining the UX, and maybe more we interact with the YAML template, for example. But then every team is free to run, to have a common package that works the way they want. It's not very necessary to have a consistent UX. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with that, where it's the implementation of how you get a report is kind of up to you, but that report needs to be, that's the thing that's shared among, you know, everything. It needs to follow the schema. And that's why it you know, they suggested splitting out the command. And I mean, because this is already happening, right? It's not like, I mean, there's analyzers and there's groups that don't use command. Yeah. So,
okay,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, you've been extracting it to remove it from command to avoid messing with it with command changes. But it doesn't mean that we extract this as an official model that everyone would be using. I get that.
Yeah, right. I mean, by splitting out command, it's not, we're not saying that you need to use this. It's just, it's removing that additional point of, you know, shared review, because that's what has caused, I mean, there has been changes in command recently, and I think that's the second most touched package, right? And so if we could remove that, that would be, yeah, like that would be good. I guess my thing is if we all, well, yeah, who owns issue is really the question, because that's the.
Yeah, so I think that the first thing is just, I think that Olivier, your point earlier is probably the best one, which is for us to start moving forward with common, we need to remove things that have strong individual owners. And so there's a couple modules that do, like rule set. It makes sense for some things to be simply split separately, like every group brings your own command. And then if we can reduce the surface area of common to just issue, then we have to figure out what to do with the issue. But I don't know if we have a consensus on that one.
Is there a way to, in GitLab, require, I mean, it would be great if we could like have all these packages in one repo, but then just require a shared review, or shared owners essentially of just like the issue package, but have the other ones like rule set, which could be used by any analyzer.
Yeah, so there's code owners, but with code owners we don't get independent versioning.
Right.
And there's a couple things around like I don't know. There's other points somewhere written down.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like you still have reservations around separate projects or repositories for each of these.
Yeah. I mean, but now the more I think about it, it's. I mean, my biggest thing is like I would like command to be split. The other ones, I mean, I totally get the problem. And I'm kind of going back in between, like on one hand, I like from a design, like a Go, like what's idiomatic Go, having the repo with issue, Logutil, rule set, having a library, a repo that I think is good. That's idiomatic Go, right? Like having a large, or it's not necessarily bad, having multiple, a ton of smaller packages for a single repo. That just doesn't, I don't know, but maybe that's the way we should have it.
So I'm also thinking about, I don't think that we're that far away from this, but if the goal is to maintain some uniform consistency in the interface, it would make sense if we had a common dependency that provided interfaces. So common, it's similar to our plugin architecture, really. So if there's expectations that common says all analyzers need this thing, then the analyzers can provide those things. But I think that the biggest issue is, and this is actually the point I wanted to raise on number 4, when we were talking about, when we talked about this in the past, and Zach has this nice ASCII diagram here. The thing I've always struggled with on the framework side of this is I don't see a way where we can regroup without causing even more technical effort to bump any changes. Any kind of midway grouping that we add just means we're going to have at least one more step when we have to bump changes across repositories, I think.
Yeah, I think I want to, that's another one where I'm not so sure I like what I said or believe, want to move forward with that. I think what I'm more in favor of is kind of what I suggested earlier, was just having, instead of SAS use the common command, have SAS just replace a common command.
Yeah,
and that be the framework. I mean,
yeah. I think
yeah.
I think that makes total sense for command. I would love to figure out a solution for these other modules. And issue is a good example of that. If we have common enforcing a basic interface for, and when I say interface, I guess I mean the Go construct of what an interface is. It's a common set of expectations and receivers that receive specific messages that are uniform. Can we apply that model to issue? Can we define an expectation for what issue is and then have individual issues per group? I don't feel like we can unless we drastically decrease the surface of what an issue is.
You will face the same distribution that we have the schemas, like what is specific to one report type, what is shared between all of those. It's exact same hierarchy, but building that in the Go library.
Yeah. So what we've talked about already, then I'm adding number 12 here, takeaways. We need to split solely solely single owner modules first. That makes the most sense. I think rule set is probably the clearest one there. I had some cleanup things up above, like template doesn't need to be in common. It's just like a random directory tree we stored somewhere. But I just don't feel like that. I don't know if what we have so far, which is split out some solely owned modules and then look at bring your own command. That's definitely something that we should look into. Is that enough to get us? Are we getting any benefit out of those two changes? I think B, we definitely would be, but I don't think that we have solved the main issue here, which is issue.
I have a question about the schemas, where Olivia, you were talking about how it's obviously there's multiple, or there's different schemas for each report type, but since the Rails app, there is a common schema, correct? I mean, so then for all the individual types, why not just have, for example, if secret detection needs a specific field, that's optional within the common schema. And that goes with everything else. So then you have this fully flexible schema. There's just one schema that can fit the mold for multiple report types. And that's what is used to validate on however we end up trying to validate this with the the output of the analyzer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that means you will have two levels of implementation. You would have kind of an issue or vulnerability package in common that will handle the generic aspect of a vulnerability and of what the report should contain for all report types. And then each analyzer would have to have its own implementation code to achieve the type specific implementation, like adding the property that are necessary, that are mandatory for this type of vulnerability, which means you would have to have another common repository somewhere for all the SaaS analyzers, because you don't want to repeat that code into all the analyzers. And that's why everything was put into the same place in common, because it was not worth having this sub layer. But this is a good question. Because we want more autonomy, this might be a good way to achieve that. But this also means you would enter this cascading level of dependencies when you have your analyzer that depends on your intermediary layer, and this layer depends on the common report or issue package. So you are putting yourself in the situation when you have to update to bump multiple dependencies in a cascading way.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, well, maybe I don't, because it, like, you know, if we have just one schema, right, and in the new issue package that that reflects that schema, right, then each analyzer that produces a report will have to confer with what is in this new issue package, right? And then that report needs to be validated by the schema. And I guess then you know, you could have like unit tests or whatever to verify the output, like the exact output, not necessarily verifying that it matches the schema, but verifying the, you know, the exact output to make sure that, okay, that all the fields for secret detection or all the fields for SAST are met.
Yeah, but how do you define what's necessary for secret detection versus what's necessary for SAST? These are different needs. You have different mandatory properties from one report type to another. So what you said could work well with a unified schema, so that you will have just one schema that will work for every report types. Then you could have everything into one layer, like common issue package, just one schema, just one implementation, and it works well. This is not the case right now, because right now you can say, I need each vulnerability needs to provide a location, but the mandatory properties within that location object varies depending on your report type. For container scanning, you need to provide an image property. For SAST, you need a file path, you need the line number, etc., etc. So the only way you can make sure that for your specific type of vulnerability, you are producing a valid report is to validate it against this specific schema. So either you put all of those things into common, which means anytime you're doing a change in common, you need to make sure you don't break all the other schemas, which is the problem we have currently with the schema repository. Or you break this down into different layers. One layer, which is making sure that whatever you put into your sub schema, it always validates against the common report schema. But then you need this sub layer of implementation when you are telling, well, this is valid against secret detection, or is this valid against SAST, or is this valid against dependency scanning? So
Gotcha.
then, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see it.
We can do some kind of sorry. We can do something similar in issue that we do in our schemas, which is use some basic inheritance. So we have an issue struct, and then we have a SAST issue struct that extends issue to actually get us a bit closer there. And maybe code owners is the solution for something that has a lot of like mixed dependency there. So we split out issue module into base issue and our individual issue structs, and then we can apply code owners to the individual issue structs for our individual groups. But we will have shared ownership over the base issue struct. Maybe that won't be that big a deal. I don't know.
This is exactly what happens on the Ray side with the parsers. We have a common parser that handles all the generic parsing, and then you have a SAS specific type for the SAS location, container scanning location, etc., etc. So if we can do that in Go, yeah, that would be a great improvement indeed.
I like that idea, Lucas.
Okay, I'll add that down here then. So reduce and share. So for issue, I'll just say we can use some struct and I don't know. I'm gonna say struct inheritance. Everyone will know what that means. That's I think that is definitely an improvement that we can work from there. It will require everyone to update their analyzers to inherit from the child structs, but happy to volunteer SAS to try it first. We have the most to update, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can try that. We consider scanning. This is just one analyzer to change.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
I mean, you can just try it on one analyzer. That doesn't hurt. Even for SAS, just one, just to verify it works well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we're over time. Did we cover everything? We didn't really talk about submodules. I don't know if we see a need for submodules at this point, but it is something we could definitely use if we feel a need to keep things in the same location. But I think it's more valuable to, I think it would be valuable if we want to split issue out and reference issue back in common, but I don't think that we want to do that right now. Anything we talked about, or sorry, not issue, but I don't say command. Any reason that we have to split something out is because we want to change the ownership and usage paradigm.
And independent versioning. So bringing it back to the parent model, get rid of that independent versioning, I'd say. Because to get the updated version of that subdependency, you will need to update the parent one. So yeah, I'd already see where it could be beneficial, but I haven't read everything around that. So
I guess I need to say git submodules, since submodules is a bit ambiguous. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think this was productive.
thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
But